Welcome to Mamahood After Trauma, where we stop pretending and heal out loud. I'm Emily Cleghorn, trauma survivor, cycle breaker, and mama rebuilding from the inside out. If you're ready to break cycles, trust yourself again, and rise without shame, you're in the right place. Let's go. Before we dive in, I want to introduce you to something brand new. If you love the podcast and want a deeper connection to your healing, check out the monthly Peace Pack, a small trauma-informed tool delivered each month straight to your mailbox to help you find calm in the everyday. You'll also get access to our private Patreon community where mamas like you can share, support, and learn together. Sign up with the link in the show notes. Hello, mama, and welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. Today, we are joined by Kate. Welcome.
Hi, Emily. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So let's dive in, shall we?
Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So to get us started, can you share a little bit of your story and how you came to work in this space?
Yeah, for sure. My story. So it's always such an interesting question. Like, where
It's
do we
such a broad
begin?
question, isn't it?
So, Brett. Well, I think maybe I will summarize, but start early. So I grew up in New York City. I was raised by two very loving parents. I was really fortunate to have been raised in a very privileged environment. I was also raised in a home where there was a ton of anxiety, a ton of perfectionism, a ton of. It's interesting. I bet some of your listeners can relate to this. There wasn't necessarily like outward external pressure and stress put on me. I think my parents said a lot of the time, we just want you to be happy. But the fact of the matter is that I watched two parents go through life with a huge amount of stress and pressure on themselves. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but so much of what children absorb is not what's being said, but what's being felt. And so I started having panic attacks when I was very young, probably 7 or 8 years old. And I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of panic much of my life. I learned as I became adult, I sort of learned how to manage that in new ways. But that was sort of a very identifying factor for me, right? I would have described myself as an anxious person.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting when I went back to get my degree. I'm a clinical social worker by training. And when I went back to get my degree, I thought I wanted to work with kids. I thought I wanted to be a adolescent or child therapist. And what I learned very quickly when I started that work was that the people who really wanted and needed to be in my office were the parents, and specifically the moms. That's sort of who I gravitated towards and who gravitated towards me. And we know this intellectually, right? We know that there's a connection between maternal and child mental health, and yet, when I was able to really see what it looked like when parents got the support they needed, how differently things shifted for those children, I was pretty mind blown. So my work then went to early maternal mental health, and I started a clinic here in Colorado, and now I'm doing coaching and consulting and teaching and speaking, and here I am today. And I've got two teenage daughters who are 19 and 16. And I will say, as I think people can relate, our kids are our biggest teachers, right? I was really committed after I had pretty significant postpartum anxiety after my first, that I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that I wasn't projecting my anxiety onto my daughters. So it's been a lifelong journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey. Um, and I really want to highlight what you said when you were talking about the impact and the transformation that you see for kids when mama gets the support that she needs. And that's that's a huge driver for everything that I do and why we're sitting here right now having a conversation is because it is so important for our kids that we as mamas get the support and have the tough conversations that for so long we haven't been having. It these these are the conversations that used to be taboo, like we don't talk about these things, and now it's so important because when we're not having the conversations, that's when we all feel really alone and really isolated. And that I call it trauma brain goblins attack and tell you that you are all alone and you're not good enough and all of these defeating stories that aren't true but feel true. And so thank you for being here and sharing your story. So what was your journey like raising two daughters as you navigated that path of not projecting your anxiety on them, because it's tricky.
Mm.
And I can say from my own personal experience, it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'll set a little bit of a different stage to answer that question. I have no doubt you're going to agree with me when I say this, but we all project all the time. So the ultimate goal can't be to never project. From my perspective, that's yeah, I assume I assume that you would agree, but I want to make sure that we're setting that stage because I find in the work that I do that there sometimes is a there's all or nothing thinking that can come in. Just a little bit of neuroscience for folks who don't already know this. When we're in a state of threat, our brain will automatically go to all or nothing thinking. And a lot of people who had trauma in their lives or who are living with some sort of perceived or real threat, that all or nothing thinking is going to come with the territory, right? And I think a lot of times people think, well, to be happy and to be healthy and well means that I'm happy all the time, and we want to nip that, right? We want to be like,
Yeah.
oh, no, we can feel all the feelings and still be healthy and grounded and well. In fact, that's the definition of mental health, right? So same with projection and judgment. We talk a lot about judgment in the work I do. And so I think the goal is to be so self-compassionate and self-aware that we can notice when we're projecting
Yes.
and get off that tangent, right? So
Yeah.
to answer your question, I think there are a couple of things, a couple of phrases I remind myself of that I started telling myself when my daughters were really young. Number one is, am I willing to do the hard work now so that they don't have to do it later? And that is, in my mindset, the definition of, I don't love the term good mothering because it infers that we're trying to not be bad moms, and that sets us up for all kind of fear. But when we're willing to do the hard work, to be the ones who are uncomfortable, so that our children don't have to do that work, that hard work that's actually ours, and be uncomfortable later, to me, that's the ultimate gift we can give our kids. So,
And
am
that's
I
a really,
willing?
really powerful question. Am I willing to do the work so they don't have to later?
Exactly right. I just got the chills. I mean, even I
Mhm.
ask myself, there might be like a time, again, my girls are teenagers now, so I'm working with different relationship dynamics than when they were little, but there are times where I will feel triggered about something, right? Because it's
Mhm.
easy. We can feel like 3-year-olds when we're raising 3-year-olds. We can also feel like 16-year-olds when we're raising 16-year-olds, right? We can get triggered right back in. And there are times when really what I want to do is like, yell back or act like a 16-year-old, and I have to remind myself, hang on a second, I have an obligation in this moment to tend to myself so that I can show up in a secure, steady way for my child. That's hard. It's actually easier to slam the door and run out of the room. So this question comes in little doses and big doses, right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
The second statement I love that I say to myself often is everything we want is on the other side of a hard conversation.
Oh,
Everything we want is on the other side of a hard conversation, whether that's a hard conversation with ourselves or our partners or our children or our extended family or people at work or whatever it is, right? Because often we're so scared of having that hard conversation that we limit ourselves from what we really want. And so I'm bringing this statement into your question because I think I am frequently having hard conversations with myself,
yeah.
right? Who do I want to be in this moment? Not what should I do, which I think a lot of times is the questions we ask ourselves as moms, and then we kind of miss this point of the energetic exchange that we talked about a moment ago. Who do I want to be in this moment? And what do I need to do, or what do I need to tend to inside of myself in order to show up as that mother, as that human, as that person? These are questions I've been asking myself since the day those little ones were born. So I think I inevitably project much less than I would if I hadn't been doing really regular, consistent support of myself along the motherhood journey. When I'm projecting, I know it immediately because it does not feel good in my body. Like I now
Yeah.
can tell when I'm offloading something onto them that's actually mine. So that was a long answer, but does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And it's very much like I tell my audience around building awareness with your triggers. It's not about never getting triggered again. It's about building the
That's right.
awareness that you can identify when you're triggered so that you're not sitting in the passenger seat.
That's right.
And so your your answer just then made a whole lot of sense and is I think it's applicable to a lot of different parts of a healing journey and a
Mm,
motherhood journey because there are all these different little nooks and crannies that if you have the awareness and you're able to identify it, then you've reclaimed your power in the moment.
Yeah, I talk a lot about agency in my work, right? That idea of choice and control. And I think certainly people who have experienced some form of trauma, often in actual traumatic experiences, someone has very little, if zero, agency, right?
Yeah.
Which is what makes those so traumatic, right? We
Yeah.
need a sense of agency to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, interestingly, motherhood can trigger us, whether we have big T trauma or little t trauma, right back into that place of feeling like we
Yeah.
have no agency. And I hear moms say all the time, well, I have to do this thing or I can't do this thing. And I know it can feel like that. I mean, I do think motherhood triggers us all the time. And you
Mm-hmm.
probably talk about this in your work, but I'm a big fan of internal family systems and parts work and all those little parts of us. They're getting woken up when we have these little humans who are suddenly reminding us, either consciously or unconsciously, of what it felt like when we were children. I mean, we're being triggered all the time. So I do think it's a really interesting question to be asking in general, to your point. What happens when I'm feeling triggered? And how can I make sure that I'm not unintentionally expecting my child to
Mm-hmm.
change something about themselves so that I don't have to feel emotionally uncomfortable. To me, that is the road to disaster when it comes to attachment and child mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tell my audience all the time it's your trigger is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
That's right. Beautiful. Beautifully said.
So, what are part of my mission, let me get my thought out here. Part of my mission is making healing accessible to all mamas, regardless of whatever financial restraint may be present in their life in this particular moment. And so, with that in mind, I ask my guests here on the podcast to share one or two action steps that our listener can take with them on their journey and help them make progress forward. Now, this is taking into consideration that healing is not linear and there are phases and cycles and layers and all of that thing. But what's one or two action steps that our listener can take with them today?
I'm going to give you two very simple ones, but I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. And you mentioned something in the very beginning of this conversation that alluded to this. So we might come full circle, as we move through this. But one of the things that's really interesting, has been studied for decades and decades and decades, is I'm going to sort of simplify this a little bit into kind of, if we can get really clinical in this language, but kind of layperson terms for a moment. The way I like to describe this to people is that the results of our life, like really, like what our life looks like in this moment today. And for some of your listeners, that might be I'm feeling a lot of disconnection with people. It might be my house is always messy and never organized. It might be I'm not able to get things done. It might be I'm feeling anxious. It might be the opposite. It might be I have a job I love. I'm really empowered. I'm in a healthy relationship. So that's what I mean by results of our life, right? What we actually know is that the results of our life are deeply connected to the beliefs that we have about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Those beliefs we have about ourselves are, especially if there's been like a post-traumatic stress disorder that someone's been dealing with, are deeply impacted by trauma, right? So I want to honor that, and I'm sure you do this all the time. I hope your listeners have internalized this, but the beliefs that similar to the triggers, the beliefs we have about ourselves may not be our fault, meaning we learn these things given the situations, what people told us, but it is our responsibility to actually decide, is this a fact or a story, which is the ultimate work. The reason I bring that up now is because if the actions are incongruent with the belief, they're going to be really hard to access. So I'm going to give you two action steps, but if someone believes I am not worthy, or I am not okay, or I am not enough, or whatever that thing is, they might try these things a couple of times, but they're going to feel really hard to access. They're going to be distracted because it's almost like a hose that has a kink in it. It's like there's no flow, there's no congruence. So I want to offer that reminder up just to help your listeners say, okay, please try these things. But if you find them really hard to access, just understand it's not because they don't work. It's because you may need to go back and do a little more work around what is the self-belief that we need to embrace and make room for. They're going to make these action steps accessible. Make sense, Emily?
Absolutely. Thanks for pointing that
Yeah,
out. I love it.
sure. Okay, so there's two. Number one, back to this idea. I mean, as moms, man, we put all of our effort towards our kids, right? Like, how often do you hear someone say, it's selfish to take care of myself, or I don't have the time, right? Or the energy. And sometimes it's financial resources, but it's often resources like time and energy and whatnot. I'm giving all these things to my kid. Um, we cannot expect ourselves to be resilient to stress if we're not taking care of our brains. Full stop. And there is a really important thing to remember, that brain health does not have to be extraordinary efforts. We don't need to do giant things to keep our brain healthy. We actually can do very small things to feed our brain. So I call this your non-pharmaceutical prescription to mental health. And I'm just going to run through the 8 things that I have on my prescription. And I think I will just let your folks know that just like any prescription you were to get from any doctor, you start with the lowest possible dose, right? So we don't like start with the unachievable. We start with the teeny tiny things. And I really want folks to think about this as we often think about doing these things for our bodies, but I really want us to think of this as doing these things for our resilience to stress. Motherhood is stressful, full
Mhm.
stop. Life is stressful, full stop. So we just want to make sure we are giving ourselves what we need to show up as the best possible version of ourselves. So what we have on that non-pharmaceutical list are sleep, obviously, right?
Mhm.
Nutrition, we want to be eating for our brain. We all know logistically what the things are that help and don't help, but again, we want to think of baby steps. Sleep, nutrition, movement, mindfulness or breath practice. That breath, it's the second thing I'm going to teach you in just a moment, is really important to be thinking
Oh,
about.
it's
How are we breathing?
hugely powerful
Hyd-
too.
Hugely powerful. Hydration, dehydration and anxiety are so deeply interconnected. And I know for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, of course I'm feeling angsty and anxious. Like I haven't had any water in the last 4 hours. So that's a fairly simple one, right? Nature, time outside. By the way, you don't need to go for an hour long hike. Nature can be a walk around the block. It can be
Mhm.
something where you're just getting outside. Play, which is interesting. I think that can be really hard for adults, but play can be just mixing it up, putting on music when you're cooking dinner or, driving a different way to work. It's still kind of mixing up your brain a little bit so that you can, loosen the rigidity in your life. And social support, which just means, again, I tell a lot of my moms who maybe someone's is an introvert, not an extrovert, just look in the eyes of the clerk at the grocery store because that connection turns on our parasympathetic nervous system. So that's one. And I might invite your listeners to just pick one or two things on that list to focus on, and it's just simple little things. Does any questions about that, Emily?
No, no, that's a fantastic list.
Yeah, it's all based on brain science and research, and I think things that we can already do. And I want to remind everybody that that can feel like, oh my gosh, that's so much. These are actually, you're already doing a
1%,
lot of these things already. Exactly. That's right. That's right.
1% better. That's all you need to
1%
do.
better. The second thing is a breath pattern that has been shown to turn off our sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, turn on, rest and digest. It's so simple. I've actually trained myself to breathe this way a lot of the time. Again, I have a history of anxiety, and this has really shifted my physiology and my nervous system a bunch. It's an inhale and exhale breath where the exhale is just a little bit longer than the inhale. So when we're stressed, we're taking in more oxygen than we're releasing carbon dioxide because our body needs that to be able to fight or run, right? That extra exhale, you breathe in for 3, you breathe out for 4. That little beat more of an exhale sends an immediate message to your brain that there's no real threat here. And very quickly, the nervous system will switch. And that is something that I think we can all do when we're driving our car, when we're waiting in line, when we're putting a kid to bed, when we're whatever the thing is. So there are two little tips.
Yeah, yeah. I teach the longer exhale than inhale as a trigger tool. So
So
yeah,
good.
yeah, so good. Uh, how can our listeners connect with you further if they'd like to do so?
I am active on Instagram. I love meeting people over there. That's really a source of, I'm a trained social worker like you. I think everyone needs to have access to really good support, and that is a place where I offer a lot of free content and free support. And so please come find me over there. Say hello in the DMs. I would love to meet you. My website is katekripke.com, and if anyone is interested in learning more about my work, you can come find me over there.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that there are links in the show notes so that it's easy for you to connect with Kate if you'd like to do so. I know for myself that things fall out of my brain quite regularly. So I try and make
Same,
it as
same.
easy for you all as I can. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining me on the podcast today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me, Emily.
Thanks for listening to Mamahood After Trauma. Take one insight from today. breathe, reflect, and keep healing out loud. Subscribe to the podcast for more stories, tools, and support. And remember, Mama, you're breaking cycles and rising with honesty. Until next time, mend the past so you can mama in peace.